So I made a poll on which color I should cover for a video, and you guys are a bunch of trolls since somehow green won. Green is considered one of the weakest colors in Lorcana right now, and least played colors in the meta, and some of my viewers just want me to get whacked over and over by red-purple by piloting green steel mill or something. But the fact is, there's actually a green deck in the meta that's emerging and performs exceptionally better than people know. And today, I'm about to reveal the highest ranked green player stats on Pixelborn ladder, and the results may surprise you. Every color in Lorcana has some unique main characteristics towards its color identity, along with some secondary characteristics that it shares with some other colors. For example, some of green's secondary theme characteristics revolve around stuff like bounce, ward, evasives, damage character interaction, along with some other things. But I would say green's primary identity focuses on action themes and the discard mechanic, though expert players at this point realize green's true identity revolves around all of its best cards being uninkable. The green steel mill deck tries to abuse the action recursion mechanic along with bounce themes for board control to make the opponents cry, so we've already covered that many times on this channel. But green steel discard abuses the discard mechanics using Buckies and Johns to the maximum. And trust me when I say this from personal experience, the opponent tiers are much saltier this time around. So, seeing that green was winning the poll, I felt like I needed to start pumping out some games on ladder with green steel discard. But after literally running into the blue-red popsicle deck 5 games in a row, it seemed like it would be an extremely painful journey to try and get the necessary volume to make a good video covering green steel in the metagame. And I was feeling particularly lazy about this, so I knew what I had to do. I had to get in touch with the king of green steel discard himself, zeroskatr12. Now, most people at the top ladder knew that Skater had been super successful with the deck, but no one really knew his true stats, including zeroskatr himself, as he didn't even know how to access his stats on Pixelborn. So, the Green Steel division at Miller Brewing Company has sent me out as lead headhunter to get this man's green steel stats and expertise at any cost. Prior to this video, I had never actually spoken with him directly, and our main interaction involved me trying to deck snipe him on ladder by squeezing in pick-a-fights in my purple steel deck to counter the green steel menace. There was a lot of salt involved on my end, so I knew that this might be a tough sell. Of course, everyone knows that the first thing you do in a negotiation is start out with a lowball offer. My company budget for stealing this sought-after information was $2 million, and after starting with a $5 offer, we wait patiently for a counter. People who play discard decks are heartless, cruel, and unwavering, and I only know this because people who play mill decks are of the same breed. We exist to win the game in cruel and unusual ways, and we're certainly not going to be bought out by a couple dollars. Oh, okay, well that was pretty easy. Sucks that he missed out on $2 million though. Man, somehow we got our hands on the super secret stats of the Green Steel Discard King. And holy crap, he's got 540 games with this deck. He's positive into every single matchup except Blue Steel. And wow, just look at that red-purple win rate. I've seen a bunch of red-purple players online complain about the discard matchup, and here's the living proof of that. Now, I covered a deck tech on red-green discard a while ago, where I did point out that I thought green steel discard would probably be the best version of discard, but I didn't realize that the deck would perform this insanely well. Red-green discard and green steel discard have very similar play patterns and game objectives, so let's break down the deck lists and see what makes the steel version superior. So in the 1-drop slot, Skater only runs 3 Fire the Cannons and 4 Improvise, and no actual 1-drop characters. For my red-green list, I ran both Flynn Riders and Minis, which makes a lot of sense because I was also running Teeth and Ambitions, and 1-3s are a great self-target for Teeth. Skater's choice of opting out of any 1-drop characters makes a lot of sense though. Captain Hooks will die to Storm Rajon and Teeth, and 1-3 Flynn Riders actually don't have enough of a presence with Improvise to provide the badly needed early defense against the meta. The critical number in the metagame, especially facing purple, is 3, and Improvise on a Flynn Rider is just not enough to punch through that number. Cannons, however, provide the perfect damage output against decks like Hyper Aggro, against its Pinocchios or Lilos and Maleficents, cards that a 1-3 won't reliably be able to take out given the amounts of bounce protection or bodyguards in that deck. Cannons are also a critical card to address the early tempo drops of Steel Song, as their 1-drops all have 2 willpower in Stitch, Cinderella, and Queen. Cards that, again, something like 1-3 Flynn Rider will have issues addressing reliably, even if you do have an Improvise in hand. In the 2-drop slot, Skater runs Flynn Riders and Buckies. I opted out of 2-drop Flynn Riders in my red-green discard deck, and I'm going to say that was definitely a mistake on my part. I actually overlooked how incredible Flynn Rider's value was in the line turn 2 Flynn Rider, turn 3 John, sing sudden chill with Flynn Rider. This is actually a very common curve sequence with the deck, and having the flexibility of dropping either Bucky or Flynn Rider on turn 2, depending on the makeup of your hand, in addition to being able to shift into Floodborn Flynn Rider later on, makes Flynn Rider 2-drop a very natural fit for the discard deck. Turn 3 is where Steel starts taking a massive edge over the red version. 3 is the magical willpower in the metagame right now, but turn 3 is also one of the most important turns in Lorcana, as some of the most crucial characters and items come out on turn 3. Of course, most of the time both decks want to drop a turn 3 Prince John, but you're not going to have John every game, and in those scenarios, red kind of just sits there doing nothing, and sometimes just casting a Hypnotize, which is okay, I guess. But Steel has access to cards like Smash and Tinkerbell in this 3-drop slot, both incredible cards in the meta in terms of controlling the opponent's board state, a problem that most discard decks face. Turn 2 Bucky into turn 3 Tinkerbell with a turn 4 Floodborn Tinkerbell backup while getting a discard out of the opponent is something that other green discard color combos just have no way of matching. Smash, of course, can take out the most relevant characters on the board if you miss your John drop, and if you really need to, you can Strength of a Raging Fire Pinocchio or something if you don't have either of those cards. And rounding out the 3-drop slot for Steel is also Benjas, which cause incredible tempo disruption and card advantage against potential Lanterns, Fishbone Quills, Popsicles, Spellbooks, and maybe weight sets. Anyways, Steel's 3-drop slots have a fantastic toolbox of drops that can be utilized, while Red's is very lacking in that department. Since discard is playing Bucky, the 4-drop slot has another huge game changer for Steel. Floodborn Jafar. Red has access to Floodborn Mini, but at a 2-3 body, she actually doesn't offer up much board control for the deck. But a Jafar with a 3-4 body in this metagame that threatens to also draw a card if you attack into it has incredible presence on the board. I've always been a fan of the 3-4 stat line, as it survives Smash and trades with almost every early character in the meta, and Snake Mim can't even trade with it profitably. So Jafar is another huge advantage Steel has over Red for its defensive influence on the board. One very noticeable cut from Skater's deck is no Daisy Ducks, and I'm actually behind this 100%. While testing red-green discard, my original list had already started to cut down on Daisy Ducks, and I wasn't sure why, since she seems so thematic to the deck, but I think I finally put my finger on why I felt like she was so bad. First of all, a 2-3 stat line in this metagame is terrible. As a 4-drop, she really can't trade with anything and basically dies to everything relevant in the metagame. Also, I think turn 4 is discard's most important and critical turn, as it's the turn before a turn 5 grab your swords. Turns 2 and 3 is used to establish a Bucky or John or both, and you absolutely need to do something meaningful on turn 4 before Bucky and John get potentially wiped out to a grab your sword. Daisy Duck isn't a Floodborn and doesn't provide a Bucky trigger, and she can't quest until turn 5, leaving either Bucky or John to get wiped off the board and thereby missing their entire value. or she could just die herself on the opponent's turn to a smash or something. Daisy is a very awkward card in terms of deck tempo at a critical turn 4, where something proactive is needed to generate value from the Bucky and John engine. And so I think Daisy is definitely a cut from the deck, and Skater clearly recognized this over the 500 games he grinded out. We don't really need to cover Donald Duck too much in this video again, as he is a Floodborn trigger and an amazing source of one-sided card advantage, as your opponent can just draw on your turn, but you can simply make them discard the card that they just drew. I will mention though that Donald is an absolute monster if you use Improvise on him, as a 3/5 can take out and survive most trades. On turn 5, Red has Maui, which is board control, but Steel has both Beast and Grab Your Sword. Emo Beast is one of the best cards against Red, which I briefly covered in my last video about Red Purple and Red Steel. And Swords is another big way to control a board that may have become overcommitted on the opponent's side, as a popular approach against discard is to play out your hand as fast as possible if you're lacking in card draw. On turn 6, Red has Lady Tremaine, which actually isn't a very useful card, as the opponents are usually playing out their hand and has multiple characters on board, and will just sacrifice its worst one. But Steel has Tinkerbell and also unlocks the crazy good Tinkerbell on 6 with a Sung Grab Your Swords with your turn 5 Beast. These turns 5 and 6 Steel lines are just one-sided Be Prepareds that come out a full 1 or 2 turns faster. And Red has turn 7 Be Prepared, but that wipes your side of the board too. So for this reason, Green Steel discard is actually superior to Red Green discard in almost every single aspect. So the entire core of the engine of the deck obviously runs off of Bucky and John, and you just absolutely need at least one of them in every game. This means if you open a hand without a Bucky or John, you do a full send 7 to find one on your mulligan. 8 copies of these cards in a 60 card deck list, and when you mulligan a full 7, you're trying to find 8 out of 53. It's actually an incredibly high chance that you'll find either a John or Bucky this way. Without going through all the math, the chance that you have Bucky or John in your opening hand each game using this mulligan strategy is basically like 90% or more, and that's not even including the 2 or 3 draw steps you have to find one by turn 3. Now, if you already have a John or Bucky in your opener, just use your common sense to do mulligans. With Bucky, maybe prefer to keep your Floodborns for your curve, and with John, keep the Sudden Chills or Hypnotizes. So, with the willingness to mulligan the full 7 for Bucky or John in mind, we also see why the deck was built with the numbers that it has. This deck only runs 11 uninkables. It only runs 2 copies of Shift Flynn Rider and 2 copies of Grab Your Sword. This allows you to safely mulligan aggressively without fear of drawing too many uninkables. Skater wants to maximize deck consistency above all else, and believes that as long as he can start with his Bucky or John engine, the deck will do the rest. And I think his results certainly speak for themselves. There are versions out there that run stuff like Lucifer and Bippity Boppity Boo, or bounce cards, but again, those decks sacrifice ink and mulligan consistency greatly in favor of explosiveness. I will acknowledge that those Bippity Boppity Lucifer builds are really fun to play when they go off, so feel free to go for those builds if that's what you're chasing. The opponent tiers will be much saltier, although at a lower frequency, but for some people, that's just worth it. The Bucky John discard engine is super strong, and probably Green's greatest strength in Lorcana right now. Due to Bucky and John having Ward, they're basically immortal against every deck except Steel, unless you jump through some crazy hoops to get around their Ward or play some questionable cards. It makes a lot of sense that Skater's lowest percentage win rates are against Steel, and especially Blue Steel, since Blue Steel plays Ramp for faster swords as well as a whole new world to negate all the discard you put in. If you are thinking about bringing this deck to a tournament though, it will probably lose some percentage points in best of 3 formats, as once the opponent knows you're on discard, they can start aggressively mulliganing for swords or pick-a-fights. But really, this win rate percent drop will probably mostly be affected by Steel-based matchups. And as a final wrap-up about the deck, I think the list is very polished, but there's always a few flexible spots you can adjust for the meta. Fire the Cannons is probably the biggest flex spot in the deck. I personally might run an extra Flynn Rider Shift or Grab Your Sword and cut one fire of the cannon down to 2. Skater also mentioned to me that he's been testing 2 mouse armor and even a God Tank Beast in place of Fire the Cannons, as hyper aggro has been dying down a bit in the meta, but a lot of steel is on the rise. Again, you guys can try some Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo or Lucifer variations, but remember that those uninkables may affect the consistency of the deck. And this is usually where I would do post-analysis gameplay video showcasing the deck. But it's just going to be me beating up on this poor Popsicles player over and over again. And I felt dirtier playing a discard deck than I did playing red-purple. And most importantly, I have morals. So instead, I'll just direct you guys over to some more unethical people farming others with discard. Bannable Harka, who also recently did a video on green steel discard based off Skater's build, he's got several games of gameplay with the deck. He's a very good player, and I know how much time and effort it takes to make videos while maintaining a volume enough to reach Grandmaster level. And reaching 1,000 subs is a critical number in a YouTube creator's journey, almost as critical as Discard's turn 4. So let's show him some support and get him to 1k subs. And of course, I got a shout out to Skater for sharing all the information he did with me about his experience with the green steel discard deck at top ladder. He has a Twitch channel he streams on, and I've actually watched quite a bit of his gameplay to spy on Discard's secret strategies.
Let's see, turn 5, I might play the Flynn just to have another body on board. So I think the Hypnotize has to go. Turn 6, I might play the Hypnotize actually, so maybe I get rid of the Chill. But again, surprising him with the last card in hand is just too good to pass up, so we're going to do it this way.
And despite being a dirty discard player, his play is exceptionally clean, and his mastery of the deck and decision making against all the different decks in the metagame clearly shows in his gameplay. So go ahead and give him a follow and support him on Twitch if you're interested in dirtying your own hands with some green steel discard tech.